Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Celebrate and Recalibrate Flamenco 3-day series. We are in day 1 of the event. I am Rosa Cisneros. For those that would benefit from an audio description, I am a female sitting in a cream-colored chair with a red colorful shawl that's hanging on top of it. I'm wearing a gray top that is going up towards my neck, so a bit of a turtleneck. I'm olive skin tone. I have tortoise shell, gray and black earrings. I have my long black hair pulled back, and I'm sitting in front of a burgundy wall. Thank you so much for joining us for this event. We are extremely excited to sit down and open up a space to have a conversation with people from the book that we will be referencing today, but also we invite each of you in the room to also join and to be part of this conversation. As always, this is a safe space, so there might be different opinions, which I hope there will be different opinions in the space, but we aim to ensure that everyone is respected, that we're operating from a place of love and kindness, and that you are welcome to share your opinion, but not attack any person. So we can perhaps challenge the idea, but not attack the individual. As we know, flamenco is a very contested art form. There are lots of different ways that people live, breathe, dance, and operate and are coexisting with flamenco. And today starts the beginning of looking at how different individuals are living and breathing flamenco. I see some friendly faces and some new faces as well in the room. I want to say that this is a space where it is pet friendly, family friendly, instrument friendly, colleague friendly. So no need to try and kind of be sterilize this environment. You know, we want it to have as much of a flamenco feel as we can. So feel free to leave your camera on. If you're on the phone, you know, you're moving around, that's completely fine for me. But, you know, there might be but again, this is a space for us, and we welcome conversations and comments in the chats. Myself and Kozer are from Coventry Uni. Kozer's behind the scenes, helping run the tech side, but she's also monitoring the comments section and feeding that and making sure that I don't miss anything. And we have Russell Brown here, who has helped organize the session, or the series, I should say. And very excited to collaborate with him on this project. We'll talk a little bit about the genesis of how this came to be in a moment, but I just want to thank all of you for coming, for being part of today, and hopefully you come back tomorrow and join us for the Tuesday and Wednesday part of the events. Hello, yes, if we could put in the chat where you're coming from and maybe a little bit about who you are, so we can kind of situate and understand who's in the space. We're connecting from different parts of the country, of the globe. I believe Auntie Carol Silverman has probably had to have an early morning to make today's event, so thank you for coming. If we can mute while we are not speaking, that might help with any feedback. And again, we are recording. We're not sure if this will be made publicly available, but please note that it might be. So with that, we are asking that that you're just aware that this could go online. Few people have been coming in, so once after Russell's quick introduction, I will then repeat the guidelines just so that everyone who's kind of come in understands the kind of etiquette for this space. So Russell, if you want to just say a little bit about who you are in this collaboration.
Thank you, Rosa. Hi, I'm Russell Brown. I'm so excited to be here, to be invited and to speak. So yeah, my name is Russell Brown. I'm wearing a black sweater with a hood, so a black hoodie. I have light skin with dark eyes, brown hair, and behind me is my harp, and also behind me is a large cabinet. And I'm also living with hearing disability, so anyone with disabilities is certainly welcome into my space. And to share those with me, that's been an important part of my own expression as an artist, but also as part of my research. Yes, and thank you for having me in this space. I'm not, I am Romani. My family, we've been in the United States since the 19th century, and been part of the culture here. And I am not part of the flamenco community. I did not grow up doing flamenco, but I am a proud Romani artist and dance scholar, and I hope to contribute to this conversation. And I also welcome my friends. I see Rachel, Christina, and also I really want to give a very special shout out to my dear friend and who's taught me a great deal, Piroshka Raz, who's on the call, who's also based here in New York, who is an incredible pioneering dancer, researcher, and artist. And Piroshka, I don't know if you want to just give a quick hello, but please do, if you do want to just introduce yourself briefly at this time. Okay, I have a statement from Piroshka that I'll be giving during my presentation in a little bit, but I did want to give a shout out to her she's just an incredible Roma and Sinti artist and keeper of tradition. So thank you, Rosa, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Russell. I see that we're using the chat, which is fantastic. So yes, please do use the chat. And for those that came in a little bit later, I will just remind us that this is a very safe and brave space as well. So we are recording. This might go online, but we also understand that in the process of asking questions, it might not be completely right, or the language might be clumsy. So, you know, let's also honor that and understand that we're here to try and celebrate and also think about flamenco. And I think the name of the book, Celebrating Flamenco's Tangled Roots, the Body Questions, speaks for itself. And yes, if you have any questions or comments, or if you're triggered in any way, or if you want to take something offline, I will put my email in the chat, and you're welcome to contact me, and we can have that conversation afterwards. And before we continue, I do have Meira Goldberg, one of the editors for the book, could not be here, but she did send a video. So I will play that for us so that we can also hear directly from her the vision and the reasoning behind this book and some of the questions that they've been navigating as editors, but also as artists and researchers within the field. So let me play that 1 second. Can we see that? Yes?
Yes, I can see that. Oh, let's get the player going.
Yes.
This is a good time. This is the best time. This is the only time to come together. Fractious, kicking, spilling, burly, whirling, raucous, messy, free, exploding like the seeds of a natural disorder. June Jordan. Hi, everyone. My name is Meira Goldberg, and I am co-editor with Antoni Pizá, director of the Foundation for Iberian Music at the CUNY Graduate Center, of Celebrating Flamenco's Tangled Roots, the Body Questions. Welcome to this series of book talks with the book's authors, and thank you, Rosa Cisneros and the University of Coventry, for putting this together. I have been in love with flamenco since I was 15, and I've had the immense privilege of working with and learning from the best flamenco artists in the world. This has shaped and guided my life in all my work as a performer, as a teacher, and as a scholar. I have always sought to ground my work in my lifetime as a part of this beloved community. The Body Questions is a collection of essays which poses a series of questions revolving around nonsense, cacophony, queerness, race, and the dancing body. How can flamenco, as a diasporic complex of performance and communities of practice, frictionally and critically bound to the complexities of Spanish history, illuminate theories of race and identity in performance? How can we posit and argue for genealogical relationships within and between genres across the vast expanses of the African and Roma diaspora? Neither are the essays presented here limited to flamenco, nor consequently are the responses to these questions reduced to this topic. What all the essays presented in the book do share is the wish to come together across disciplines and subject areas within the academy and without, in the whirling, raucous, and messy spaces where the body is free to celebrate its questioning, as well as the depths of wisdom and knowledge it holds and sometimes reveals. The body questions, published this year by Cambridge scholars, began with a 2-day conference and performance festival. The festival conference was held in October of 2018 at the Fashion Institute of Technology, where I teach, and at the CUNY Graduate Center, where I'm a resident scholar at the Foundation for Iberian Music. The performance festival featured a number of Black and Brown flamenco artists, including Flamenco Latino, Justice Miles, Kevin Lamar Jones, Alicia Bryan, Ariel Rosales and the Souls of Duende, Nelly Tirado with special guest Eddie Torres Jr., Niurka Marquez, Raul Rodriguez, and Yinka S.E. Graves, whose photo by Michael Penland graces the cover. We think this is the first book published with a Black flamenco on the cover. If the performance festival was groundbreaking and seminal, many connections were made, many opportunities were generated. So was the academic conference. We had 35 presenters from all over the world and from several different disciplines, from musicology and ethnomusicology to anthropology, comparative literature, and dance studies. Our keynote speaker was anthropologist, flamenca, and co-founder of the Uganda Flamenco Project, Agnes Asozi Kamya. As the book developed, we were honored to include several chapters from people who did not attend the conference, including Guillermo Castro on the key of danzas de negros on the standard tonalities of Black dances and early modern Hispanic music, Constance Vallis Hill writing on Soleá, conjuring the feminine in flamenco's cante hondo, and renowned flamenco artist Belen Maya's chapter on La Muñeca Subversiva. In what we believe also breaks new ground, the body questions features 5 chapters by Roma and Roma allied authors. In addition to Belén, these contributors include Cristiana Grigori, who is the founder of the Roma People's Project at Columbia University, Russell Patrick Brown, whose brilliant chapter opens the book, recognized scholar and flamenco artist Clara Mora Chenoy, and scholar, poet, and anti-racist cultural worker Miguel Ángel Vargas. So thank you all so very much for coming. Thank you again to Rosa and the University of Coventry for making this happen, and enjoy.
So you can see one of the editors and her voice being included in today's event. She's included a lot of names in there, some that are familiar to some of us in the space, some that are new to me. And again, this is about looking at flamenco. And for those of you that know a little bit, but maybe not a lot, my own position with flamenco, I was given flamenco through my family, was passed on to me. I come from a traditional flamenco family. I then studied at the conservatoire and also classically trained as a ballet dancer, and started really then reflecting on my flamenco dance practice, the traditional and the contemporary work I was doing. And a lot of what I've kind of kept coming back to is this idea of the mahala, which is around community. And so that for me is very central to flamenco, but to Roma dance, and whatever environment, whether that's in the studio, the academic realm, or these kind of digital spaces, that feels really important around creating community, about being in this space and honoring the moment, which I think is, for me, the essence of flamenco. And throughout today's session, I will be honoring that way of working, the mahala, in a number of ways. So you'll see that music is built in. For those that don't know, flamenco has 3 main pillars. You have the music, the singer, and the dancing, and those 3 are in combination. It's a structured, improvised art form. There are lots of questions about who gave birth to flamenco, who's influenced flamenco. I will not offer my position just yet on that. But again, this is part of what today is about. And so throughout the session, we will have different speakers, but I also ask that you honor your position and what you're hearing. And also, hopefully, you will have another opportunity a little bit later to listen to flamenco as well. So over to Russell now to present his chapter, which is, Meira said, the very first chapter that opens the book. And after reading the book, I agree, it was the best decision to have your chapter open the book because it sets the tone, which made sense to ensure that you open today's series. So over to you, Senor Russell Brown.
Thank you very much, Rosa. Your introduction and your setting of space is such a setting for community, and I hope everyone feels part of our community today. And to kick off my presentation, I'd like to spend a little time working with protocol. There's a number of aspects of protocol that I think are very important, but this genesis for this has really come from my recent attendance of the Dance Studies Association conference in Vancouver. The Dance Studies Association is a very large, prominent academic organization that provides support, as well as they openly admit now care for dance researchers, which I think is that says a lot about the times that we're in. But they have a 4-year initiative that we're in the middle of to provincialize dance studies. And so that's really this idea that we are going to, that we are disrupting colonialism as it has played out in dance, our scholarship, and our bodies. So the hub I participated in, and Rosa was kind enough to join as well on our second day. It was a closed session, but we had a number of Indigenous First Nation scholars who really brought up protocol in a very full sense. And so I will endeavor to share that work here. My first protocol emerged from that session, and something that I call I bring a wheel. I wear over my heart the Romani chakra. It's our wheel. It's a symbol on the Romani flag, and it's a symbol for also many Sinti people as well. That is, it's an old piece of technology that we have carried with us, and really affirms so much of who I think Romani people are and have been as innovators, technologists, and so I'll address a bit more of that on Wednesday during my presentation. But I bring this wheel before us as a place to gather around, as a circle, a place for meeting, and a place for discussion. And then I also hope it's a place where we can bring together an approach with honor. In Romanis, we have a word for kind of honorable action, bitav, which suggests that we approach things with honesty, with truth. And in that, I also bring up a call that was put out by Django Reinhardt after the Holocaust, that we share our truth, Maro Chachipin. So I think that's really where I'm coming from here. And I think in this kind of protocol, it's important to acknowledge that there is not equity for Roma and Sinti people. Some of my friends are not able to join this call because they do not have equal access to internet and technology. These are not people who these are researchers, these are scholars, they are avid readers, but they do not have equitable access to this conversation. And so as we talk about Roma and Sinti dance as flamenco, I think it's really important to acknowledge that we have so much opportunity, so much to look forward to in opening up this wheel as a broader space where we can learn and meet each other, especially after a couple years of being closed off and isolated. So that's really the first part of my protocol. Within that, I also wanted to add a statement from my dear friend Piroshka Raz, who's able to join us for a little bit. She prepared a statement on her understanding of Romani dance, which is something that we are developing as a concept in kind of, I would say, like Anglophone or kind of in non-Roma academic spaces. So I think that's a very interesting moment. I hope that we can talk about more later. So just to read Piroshka's statement, greetings to the participants of this festival. My name is Piroshka Raz. I'm a Romungri and Sinti from Hungary. I will be 70 in January. I've been a singer and dancer for 50 years, still performing strictly our music. I want to address a few beliefs by Gaje, non-Romani people, that our many tribes have no distinct musical arts of our own. Are you serious? Coming out of India 2000 years ago, we definitely did not exit empty-handed. With us tribes, famous as performers and musicians, we've carried all that ancient music with us to the present time. Dance movement of the feet, hands, arms, hips, all originated in India, which was a kingdom long before the creation of European countries and music dance forms. Songs in minor key, that's Asian, not Western. Oral basing, that's from India, carried into and still performed today, even without musical accompaniment. All 5 decades I've been a performer, and in present, I've personally experienced being pushed away from performing gigs in lieu of wannabes trying to imitate us in dress, song, and dance, to the point where they even call themselves gypsy dancer. Clowns would be more appropriate. I've lost gigs only to be replaced by non-Romani women. It seems that it's okay to despise real Romanis, but they love our music, so it's acceptable and appreciated as long as the performers are Gaje Gajia. There's much more to this, but this is my humble contribution. So that, again, just to recap, that was a statement from a member of my community, Piroshka Raz, who I wanted to be represented here in my opening protocol. The next piece I'd like to move on to is land. I'm coming to you from the unceded, stolen lands of the Lenape. They tended these lands for time immemorial, and their knowledge and civilization formed the foundation of the city we know today. And certainly my home borough, Manhattan. I think that what happened between the Dutch and the Lenape are so relevant for our conversation today. When the Lenape and Dutch met, we historians have been doing a good bit of work to understand that there was an understanding that the Lenape would have had, that they were welcoming the Dutch into the space, and the Dutch made an offering. But on the Dutch side of things, they said, well, we bought this land, and then they proceeded in colonizing it and pushing out the indigenous peoples. So I find that to be extremely salient to talking about these shared lands of the body, of practice, of tradition, that when we kind of approach this conversation, that when we come forward with honor, we're also aware of the colonial mindsets that we have. For example, like when we're coming in saying that who owns dance, that's a really interesting concept. I'm interested in certainly Romanis and Sintikas, like how are we thinking about ownership, and how about, because we certainly know how in the Anglophone world how ownership is discussed, and it's very well documented, and those philosophers really made sure that their ideas on ownership and property were very well known. So I want us to be aware of that space and the legacies that have a very real impact on people today. Also, the neighborhood I'm in the Greenwich Village, which has long been a refuge for African-American people and Roma and Sinti people. And we're being pushed out. Actually, my very buildings are at risk of demolition. We have the new landlord has engaged in dishonest practices. And so these traditions here are constantly under threat. And so they themselves are resilient. So I really want to drive that home. But patriarchal colonialism is still very much active. It's very much real. And I find it important for us to also continue to strive ways to bring that equity into conversation, and acknowledge that there aren't necessarily any safe spaces while this is all happening. You know, I'm not in a safe space. This conversation isn't safe. You know, our communities are constantly under threat, and so I think that's really important to bring forward. For me, myself, I'm American Roma. We often call ourselves Bashaldo, particularly within our subgroup. Well, I'm Bashaldo, but the community would sometimes refer to ourselves as Bashalde, which means musician. And I think it's also important to call out here that in the United States, there are no departments for Roma and Sinti studies, for culture. It is de facto forbidden for me to study my own culture. In approaching any department, it's necessary that I study everyone else before I can study myself. And so this is really, right, this is like part of those kind of like that settlement ideology, right? Like you must become fluent in something other than yourself. And then by that time, you'll have lost connection to yourself and your own culture. So like these practices are also still very much part of how dance studies works today. It is an essential part of how dance and music scholarship operate today. And it is very real reality for Roma and Sinti scholars, dancers, artists, whenever they approach the academy. When we are in the academy, we're typically forced to study the humanities, I'm sorry, not humanities, in human rights and activism, which are so important. And I so stand with my brothers and sisters who do that work. But we also have a right to study who we are and ask those questions and be wrong. That's one of the hardest things I find sometimes is when we speak, we're corrected instantly. You know, for hundreds of years, the non-Roma have gotten this wrong, and I'm not allowed one single minute to make a single mistake. And so I think that's an opportunity for me to be even better. And so I'm not daunted by that, but I want to point that out because these are all very real realities. And then kind of the last, this is a long protocol, but the last protocol I have is really in relation to dance. I work as a technologist. My family, we've been technologists for centuries, blacksmiths, silversmiths, landscapers, nurses. My mother made sure I learned our traditions alongside technology, and that's the same thing, right? There was a really great quote from the new dance show, Open to Everything, sorry, which features a lot of a diverse cast of Romani dancers. And there was a statement in there in one of the songs that said, just because you're going forward doesn't mean I'm going backwards. And so I really call that up here as like another protocol that we kind of are aware of these stereotypes that we have, that we're aware of anti-Gypsyism, anti-Romani racism, that we understand that, you know, just because a community is a minority doesn't mean they're illiterate or incapable of technology. Actually, when we look at the archive, it's quite the opposite. So I'll hope to touch that in the chapter, but keeping this going, the dance protocol really for me is that as dance scholars, practitioners, and as people, our humanity to me is under threat, under new threats. Working in technology, we're doing a bit of work with early childhood education. I see how endangered our humanity is, our ability, our basic sense of the intimate, the personal, and I argue that as scholars, we have a tremendous responsibility to that. And I think for me as a Romani dance scholar, that begins with my intimate story and my experience, which I relay in this chapter that Meira Goldberg was so kind to allow me to open the book. So that was a lot, but I'll go into now the book chapter. Just kind of touch on some of the key highlights. I did do a presentation on this earlier that we can share out. So because I won't have as much time for that today. Today I wanted to spend more time on that protocol because I feel having had a series of book talks already with the other authors, that I had a lot of new information that I a new insight that I wanted to carry forward. And so I wanted to bring that up and also bring that into discussion with so many wonderful scholars and dancers that I respect on this call. So that was very, very important to me. But the chapter I wrote was called This Little Wooden World, Choreo-navigating Maritime Dance. That quote, "This little wooden world," comes from a ship log that a wealthy American settler had written on his journey to Dover, England. And he describes an affect of this ship that they're on in the late 18th century, traveling from Boston to Dover, that it's this little wooden world. And I thought that was a very profound term because it also ties in with something I discovered in my dance research, which is the significance of wooden shoes in dance scholarship. It's something that's been very overlooked. We kind of only associate it with the Dutch, but actually it turns out the history is far more vast and varied and interesting. And it is, a wooden shoe in itself is a vessel of dance and of sabotage. Sabotage being like taking a wooden shoe, a sabot, and kicking in the machine. So I'll be writing more on that later, but that's kind of some of what I'm touching on there. So in this chapter, I really wanted to pull in the communities that I have been part of, that have taught me, and kind of relate them as part of this structure I call maritime dance. This is a concept I built on a few different things. There's some performance theory that's gone into that. Some aquapelagic theory. So that's kind of like looking at archipelagos and aqua landscapes and looking at them through colonial assemblages. So there's a lot of interesting work there from scholar May Joseph, who I've also had the privilege of working with. So I'm seeing how these landscapes actually shape the dance that we work with. And I'm also using that to understand how people who have been pushed around the world or migrated around the world have actually done the work of moving dance. Dance is so often assigned to a nationalist body or to a nation state. It's actually even difficult for us. What I learned from the book talks we had the last few weeks is that it's difficult for us to even talk about dance without saying Spanish dance or European dance or African dance. So it's like we're addicted to these terms. We can't let them go. And so I think that's so telling. And in this chapter, I argue that this isn't necessarily the problem. This is the method that we as dancers, scholars have to work with. This is the way forward. And I argue that in looking at dances like what we call like percussive dances, like Irish dance or tap dance, flamenco, that our ancestors, our dancestors, have been tackling these very same problems for centuries. And so that's incredibly important to me. So I think I'm almost at time, or Rosa, do you just want to do a little time check?
You can continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And also, like, as I'm going along, if you like have questions or concerns or anything you want to, or if you haven't already, just drop them in the chat. And then, we can bring those up later. There is a Q&A or discussion, hopefully, later on. So if anything in particular jumps out at you, please seize it. I'd love to know your thoughts. Going back.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Can I just say something? I'd like to read this part from your chapter because I think it really highlights the protocol and makes the connection to the actual chapter that you've been already describing. So it says, Irish America taught me to dance. My Roma family taught me to use dance to communicate across cultures. And a Black, trans, and queer Vogue community taught me how to be myself within my own dance. Over the last 8 years, a coalition of academics, artists, and activists on both sides of the Atlantic gave me blank rooms, pages, and weekends so that I might critically engage with my inherited practices. And I mean, that's like the very opening of the book, of the chapter. And I just love, it grounds us in a very specific kind of this here, there, going back and forth, but also positioning yourself and what you're doing and how you're critically reflecting on dance and how that lives within your body. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that after your initial thought that I interrupted you with. So yeah.
That's okay. Well, that I mean, I can really go back to there because I did want to I did previously touch on some like key highlights, but if we go back to place, I as a Romani dancer, I found a process that was finding me, and by that I mean I believe that so much of what we study knows us better than we know it. And so much of our process is coming to understand what we have been living with. And in this case, having grown up in Ohio, for my family, we traveled through the Appalachian Mountains for over a century. And how we relate to space and place is I found to be a little different than a lot of non-Roma. For us, it was very, very important to communicate and share culture and ideas with certainly the indigenous people. We attended many powwows. I learned from many indigenous elders about how to work with the land. I think, there's still a lot to say about settler culture. So unfortunately, I don't quite have the time to talk about that at the moment. But within the Roma context, I found that to be true for many other American Roma, that we visit different cultural festivals and we interface with different communities. And like if we are of a mixed background, that we often celebrate that as well. And so I found that to be really interesting and kind of have its own process that forms culture. And I also found that to echo within the dance forms I've participated in. I grew up with Irish step dance. That was my family had done traditional Hungarian, Slovak, gypsy dances and music for a long time. And then in the 50s, my grandfather made the shift, like many Bashalde have done, to switching into jazz and really, African-American art forms. And so for us, that was a place where we could explore our own identity. And my grandfather, he was very dark. He had black skin. And so and that's kind of something else within when we talk about Blackness in flamenco, I find we haven't really made space for that interrogation of race within our community. And how that plays out, because I'm very white presenting, but not everyone in my family is. And not everyone in the, so there's that kind of diversity there. And then also in finding my identity, and I wonder how often this happens in history. That's kind of part of what this chapter is. When I was dancing on Christopher Street Pier, which I'll perform from on Wednesday. I was doing my step dancing, which is like this was based on Irish step dance, but then I studied the history and saw how much Roma, Gypsy Roma and travelers have influenced that culture within Ireland. And then I was dancing on the pier, and then I met members of the House of La Beja because that was their dance spot for perhaps centuries. So there was this Maritime meeting on the water, and we exchanged culture and ideas. And I learned a lot more from them than they did from me. But for me, it was this incredible meeting place where I understood Vogue as I didn't really know Vogue Ballroom House prior to that. I didn't know what the House of La Beja was. I'd never seen Paris is Burning. So this was all pretty new to me. And as I began to learn it, I began to understand dance as not just this method of freedom or expression, but a technology that allows, I think especially underrepresented, minoritized people, a system to understand society, fashion, technology, and power, and move through that. So on Wednesday, I'll be working a bit with that, how within Vogue Ballroom House, they've been mediating gaze and technology for a long time. And that for me really brought to life a lot of historical dance forms that I think have been kind of calcified by particularly nationalism. So those are some of like the sites that are taking place. It's hard to kind of describe in a soundbite or a snippet because it's meant to be felt. So I hope to convey that on Wednesday, but in this digital format. But within that environment, I think I was able to kind of convey that in writing. So please do read the chapter if you can. But then within that, I then kind of sink into the wood of the pier and into the water. And so that kind of brings us into the discussion I brought up about wooden shoes and calceology, which is like the study of shoes, and kind of how we can see wooden shoes as this middle space between bare feet and what would have been considered by the upper class as abject poverty. And then also kind of more high-heeled or upper-class shoes that you would have, that some people had. And so that really makes me think about, when we think about percussive dance like flamenco, it really begins to get very specific about, you know, what was happening on the land. What did people have? Like, we know that in Ireland and Great Britain that there were more cows. Well, this is research I've done. There were more cows, so people had more wooden shoes. But we know that among people who were in the working classes, they might only wear their leather shoes one day a week, so they would preserve them. Whereas in Spain and France, you know, not as many cows for leather shoes. So when you think about the dance technique in Great Britain and Ireland, right? Like, we can treble, we can do all these things in leather shoes, but when we get onto the continent, our heels are a lot closer to the ground. It's a different technique. So this is something I'm bringing up because I hope it helps dance scholars get a little less in the head and more in the body with the head. That we keep that, and that to me is like that honorable scholarship, that we don't just kind of say, oh, well, these people were doing this and I think this and I think this, that we have this protocol of say, well, here's who I am, this is where I'm coming from, and this is what I think, and this is my experience. And in the book, I talk about this concept of choreo-navigation as well, which is an idea meant to encapsulate the complexity of dance scholarship and also the opportunity of it. I think as scholars, we often want to edit out the complicated and find the solid, but I argue that the complicated is the method, not as a method to kind of just say, oh, well, it all doesn't matter because it's all a mess. And, you know, because like in some sort of 90s one world philosophy that we know was ultimately colonial as well, but as really a method to get specific, as to disrupt these kind of hegemonic generalizing thoughts, and that we really think very specifically. And I think that very much relates to Roma and Sinti people and how we have a decentralized society. I think there's kind of some concepts there that I'm very keen on, but choreo-navigation in any case really is that starting point. I'm pulling on Andre Lepecki there a little bit, and when he talks about the choreo police, the choreo political, and we can kind of think about how government or society organizes bodies in space and how it organizes people in relation to the state or an authority. And the political is a process of becoming free. And so within maritime dancers, I argue that we're always wayfinding, we're always trying to find a way forward. And the scholarship or the dance can even be a map of that. But mapping has a strong correlation or tie to colonialism. So there's this conflict there, right? Like where we become known to ourselves, but then we share that with others. And then there's this kind of betrayal that happens, right? Because once we put something in writing, it can go on and live without us, and then some agency is lost. So I think dance is such an incredible place to explore these complexities and not shy away from them, as I think kind of more lit-based scholarship can get a very calcified in that way. So those are some of the core key concepts of the chapter. And I mean, there's so many more little pieces. It's a large chapter. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that. Yeah, Rosa, back to you.
Thank you, Russell. I also see that the chat is alive and working, and a few comments. Cristina Varade said, agreed, you covered so many important points in a concise way, gives us a path forward for greater understanding. And I believe that was in reference to the protocol when you were describing the three. After I read the intro to the chapter, Russell, you replied, and Kozer said, love how the multiple layers are not portrayed as a burden to carry, but rather a tool to explore different aspects of identity, not plural, but multi. So, and finally, we have Jose Antonio, who says some feedback for the Q&A part, which we will have a chance to talk about that. But he says, from my museum professional arena, I'm fascinated about flamenco as a community builder, but also as a historical wound healer. I'm also very interested in the use of the body from flamenco as a way to improve self-esteem, share your true self, and create bonds. Museums are usually vision places, not body places, where you can find your body center. That's for me incredibly powerful to work in museums from, not only with flamenco mindset. Thank you for that. And we will take that into the discussion session a little bit later. And speaking of the body, as I said, I'd like to really ensure that the body is constantly part of this digital world. And Russell, something you said, that you're thinking of the body or dance as technology. I found that really interesting. I'd love to kind of pick up on that a little bit more, because I've never quite framed it that way for myself. And so now within this flamenco conversation, to see it as a tool in that way feels really visionary, but also there's some problems in that. And so, so as I said, this is a space to challenge in arguments, not the person. So yeah, so again, I'd like to talk about that. But before we do that, you left us, Russell, talking about Maritime and this relationship with the body and space and water. And so I'd like for us to just take a few minutes to listen to a piece of music. It's flamenco, and it's called Ida y Vuelta. It's a tangos song that's, for those that know a little bit about flamenco has its roots in Spain. And there was a period where it traveled across the Atlantic for a very specific reason, which we won't get into it today. But the art form was being influenced by the musical styles it was engaging with. And those artists then coming back to Spain brought that with them. And so this song is called Ida y Vuelta, coming and going. And I think it is a beautiful moment to just stop, check in with our body. And so as you're listening, if anything comes up that you'd like to share, I think, yes, I'm trying to keep my own personal opinion back. On Wednesday, I will be sharing a bit of my own flamenco values and practice and how I live out that Roma flamenco identity. But today, I'd just like to ask us to just acknowledge and celebrate our own bodies in whatever way and however they're feeling. So Kozer, if you could play our music, Ida y Vuelta, as we listen. Yes. Thank you, Kozer. Thank you. So as we move into the second part of our session, it will be a little bit shorter. I think you can see that Belén Maya is not in the space and she's not going to make a very grand appearance. What she will do is we will watch a conversation that we had with her last night. I unfortunately received a phone call from her that she was unable to join us today for very specific reasons. She was gutted, I was gutted, so we jumped on a Zoom call in whatever state we were in, and we made it happen because it was very important to her that she honor this space and honor this conversation. And her short video talks a bit about her relationship with flamenco, but also the importance of these conversations. And her chapter, as I think you've read, is called La Muñeca Subversiva, the submersive doll. She wrote it in Spanish and it was translated by Meira Goldberg. And I think it's important to also celebrate that she wrote in her language and that was translated. Russell, you were also opening up your session around acknowledging who is and who is not in the space and the challenges of kind of mainstream spaces and frameworks. And so I just want to also celebrate that we're very lucky we could jump on this call with Belén Maya, but also, you know, I think it's beautiful that the editors allowed space for a chapter to be written in the language that the author wanted and for that to be translated. And I hope that we can continue that way of working, because there is something about being able, we're here speaking English, but you know, it'd be great to have this conversation in a multilingual way, and what that would do to the space and what that would, how that would challenge us as well. So again, I just want to honor that. So without further ado, I will play that short video, and then afterwards I will read 2 quotes from the chapter direct that speak to her argument around flamenco and queer flamenco, which is very new research area, but also new language that's emerging within the flamenco community. So I will stop my video, but play the video that we recorded last night. Can you see?
Yeah.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you, Belén Maya, for sitting down with me and making time in your very busy schedule to sit with me, but also with the broader community and people that are in the virtual space. If you could tell me, your name and a little bit about who you are, for those that don't know about you, which I find that hard, but just a little overview from your own words.
I'm okay. I've been in flamenco for more than 36 years now. I'm a dancer, choreographer, actor, therapist, teacher, director, and I've been dancing, but like more than 5 years ago, I quit my company, my manager, and the great international circuit, and began looking for another path that was more organic, more in line with my health, my mental health, my physical health, and also to be able to do all those things that I always wanted to do but never had time, because you know that the life of the performer, when you're in this big circuit that has so many responsibilities, you cannot do anything but go into the studio and spend like thousands of hours practicing and improving and choreographing, and not anymore. That was not my path anymore. So I'm daughter of 2 very famous and traditional dancers, Mario Maya y Carmen Mora. My father was Rom, my mother was not. So I'm mestiza, what we call cuarterona. I don't know if I'm quarterona or cuchichi. You know, I'm always in doubt of I'm 3/4, I'm half. I don't know. I'm not 100% wrong. And biological, and also in my lifestyle, I've never lived like a Rom. That's why I'm not really acknowledged as one by the community, because I've always lived in a very not Rom, we would say, way.
Yes.
And I'm really, you know, I'm okay with that. And I right now, well, not right now, like also 5-6 years ago, I started looking for. I tried to retrieve my identity as Rome, but in my own way, not as, you know, what I should do or how should I look, but how do I feel and what do I think is part of my life.
And thank you for that. And it's also, I think, quite poetic in the way that you are owning this moment and this past and the moments of the now. And I just have to acknowledge that many years ago, when I was a young dancer at the time in Barcelona, you did an Omega festival, and I auditioned and it was part of this event. And one of the things I remember, you gave me one of the shawls, because I wasn't told I needed to bring a shawl, and you gave me your shawl. And you were so generous and so kind, but at the same time, very kind of direct and clear of what needed to happen. And what was happening, this is why I mentioned it, what was happening was a very exploratory festival of sound, of music, of different things, honoring a very important flamenco greats. And there was something very alive in that moment where you were using and not sure what was going to happen. So it was a week kind of a commission or a residency, and you weren't sure what was going to happen. And so I felt I was holding and practicing with your kind of traditional shawl, which I felt quite just honored, but also seeing you and witnessing all of you in that moment explore and be okay with not being perfect, that stayed with me for a very long time. And I think it speaks to a little bit what you're saying now of kind of your identity and leaving the circuit and coming now. So it just, I felt like I just remembered that moment and just always being really impacted by how okay you are to challenge and to push boundaries. So thank you. Yeah.
Maybe because I was raised by my mother, and my mother took me to not only to dance classes, but also to the ballet, to the theater. I would watch theater and ballet since I was 6, all through my childhood and my teenage years till she died. So maybe because of that, I'm used to watching the stage and watching the artistic actions as very complex and very and like ¿cómo se dice? Como tomando muchas formas, like the stage
has lots of shapes, lots of
forms. So when I arrived to flamenco, I had already that view of the stage and as a performer, as an audience, and I could like see other movements, other possibilities in flamenco that in that time people that I used to work with couldn't see them because they were from Sevilla, El Tablao, La Compañía de mi Padre, you know, and they were very into this has to be like this is flamenco and the others don't exist. And I came from a completely different background, and I think that was very, I mean, it was hard. It was really hard. But with time, I understood that was mi bagaje, no? That was what I took with me, mi mochila, no?
Yeah.
And that it would be useful sometime, and it was. Not at the beginning, but later on.
Sure. And that's a lovely way of, I think, outlining this journey you've been on with flamenco. And so as flamenco continues and your own journey with flamenco, what do you see on the horizon? What is kind of for you flamenco now? And what do you hope for it to be in the future?
Well, flamenco is so complex. It's such a complex art form. It's made of so many influences. We want to believe in pure flamenco because emotionally, it's very raw and it's very direct, and it touches us in a place maybe that other art forms cannot go as deep. But also at an exotic level, at a romantic level. We want it to be more simple. We want it to be more pure. We want it to be more one level, so we can maybe as students and also as performers, we want to approach it in a way that we can hold it, that we can like grab it, or maybe understand it better, or maybe think that it's like one thing that we can learn completely. No, you can never understand or learn flamenco as a whole because it's so complex, not only in the practice of flamenco, but also in the understanding of it, in the theory of it, in the life form of it, in the politics, in the bodies, all those different subject matters that right now are developing, not really, well, yes, in Spain, but I think more in the United States, of course, because you have this history of studying art from the academia. But here, there are good researchers and people that are trying to go into theory of flamenco. But I think we have a different, we're too close to it. We're too close. But it's so complex. So for me, it's mestizo. It's always been mestizo from the very moment it was born. We cannot say it's a pure art form because it really, if you dig into it, it has all those influences from all those ethnicities, de toda la raza, de todos los grupos étnicos, ¿no? Of all this music, of all this culture, de todas las influencias. So, of course, Roma, we were there, and really there, la aportación, no, of Roma people. I think it's never enough highlighted. The importance of it. Nunca in the institutions here in Spain, in the academia, even by the own performers, it should be more like here, like it has to be in a place where it's really acknowledged 100%. But besides that, I think it's mestizo, and it's still, I mean, some people say it's dead. I think it's evolving. It's still evolving, and it will keep evolving like it always did, with all these influences and changing because it's transformative. I mean, when you ask people about flamenco, what they experience, they always tell you that it changed their life. It's transformative. So how can an art form that is transformative not transform itself? That's impossible. That's impossible.
Beautifully put. Absolutely.
So it's all the time it's transforming itself.
Yes.
All the time it's dying and being reborn. All the time it's changing shape. It's like this, the shapeshifter. It's como un coyote. It's like this form that is so that you never know how it's gonna approach you. You never know if it's gonna hit you in the heart, in the mind, in your body, in your history, your ancestors. But it always hits you. It always transforms you. So these people that wanted to keep it, like still, like a museum piece, I'm sorry, but that will never happen. So I think it's evolving, and thank God it's giving women more important place is acknowledging all these women that have companies right now. In Bienal de Sevilla, there have been more women like figuras, owners of big companies and premiering shows, more women than men, and that has been at last acknowledged. Like, okay, this is happening right now in Bienal.
Yes.
So we have our own space. I mean, it's a space that we've been fighting for so long, and it's so difficult. I mean, that's why I left everything, because I couldn't do it anymore. But I know my colleagues, my friends are there fighting. Olga, Rocío, Ana Morales, all these women. No me acuerdo ahora además, Patricia Guerrero, they're there.
Yes. And I think, we'll slowly come to an end. And, you're talking about gender and, the kind of fight and the movement, I would say, that a lot of you have been part of and continue to be part of. And I think the book also in your chapter is really beautifully reflecting on your work and on other people's work and looking and opening up questions around gender. So thank you for that contribution, because I think it's an timely and really important moment, not only in the flamenco world, but in the dance scene, but also just in society, to think about how can we be kinder to each other, and how can we be see people as they want to be seen as well, and not link labels and not put and so it feels like it's really opening up a lot of those questions around categories and and how that then lives in the body. This is for females, this is for men, and what happens with or costuming. And so thank you for that. And I learned a lot in reading that chapter from you, and it feels, and also speaking with you, I feel that you've been paving a way for not, I wouldn't say women alone, but for flamenco to, as you're saying, transform and constantly respond to where it's at. And that's, I think, very difficult, and letting go of those, it's puro, it's this, it's that, and you're honoring, or in a way you've honored that, but also say, well, it can change. And I think your chapter really beautifully does that. Well, any final words, anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, no, I'm sorry that I cannot go and I cannot be in what we schedule, but
That's no problem. This is beautiful.
Because I think these spaces are important for that we come together and we speak and there's this conversation, not only about our own, like what you say, about my own trajectory, about my career and everything, but really how my concept with Ryan concepts, or with Meira, or with other people that have written, that are in the book, how we touch, where we touch, where our theories come together. So, because I think it's important to build a structure of people that are close in this theories, in these ideas, that we think the same, or mostly the same. I think it's important to have this family.
Yes.
Inside flamenco, because sometimes we can feel really lonely and isolated. I felt like that for some time, till I found my own family. But at the beginning, it was difficult to know that there were other people like me that were doing or thinking, what I was thinking. So building this community is so important. It's so important. So thank you for building this space, and of course thanks to Meira, which is always there. There.
And it's hard to be.
Muchos años lleva ya, ¿no? Haciendo esto y yo la I'm so grateful to her. And now in Spain, slowly. These spaces are opening. Like tomorrow, I work with Fernando Lopez, which is an actor, also choreographer, dancer, etc. And we have this lecture in which we dance lectures. And he's someone also that has been for a long time now trying to open those spaces. In his case of queer flamenco, like talking about it, which is something that, in flamenco, nobody talks about it, like it doesn't exist. So talking about it and creating also family, links with all of us that think the same. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, of course, it would have been great to have Belén Maya here, but I think we all agree that her offering still brings a lot, even if it was a pre-recorded video for today's session. I will, just to honor her chapter, I will read a couple of passages just so that her words are in this space. As you might have guessed, her chapter is looking at queer flamenco. There is a whole section in the book on queer flamenco. And her very opening, as I read Russell's opening, her opening is, quote, "I've been dancing since I was 18, space, very late, space." And she continues, "Spending my childhood playing in the streets and reading stories instead of dancing in a peña, which is a flamenco social organization, or in a tablao, a flamenco club, had devastating consequences for me. When I began dancing, I tried to make up for this loss of time by locking myself in a studio for 6 hours a day, but still, I didn't suckle flamenco at my mother's breast. I wasn't raised singing and dancing flamenco or with members of my family dancing and singing for me." And she goes on. And she touched on coming from very important flamenco greats. Mario Maya is her father and is a maestro in flamenco. As she said, he is a traditional flamenco, or was a traditional flamenco dancer. And so she continues in the chapter looking at the binary ways of talking about flamenco dancing and movements and gender, and how these are female movements, these are male movements. And I know personally that lives in your body. As I said earlier, I was raised traditionally, so I had, the kind of the upper body, but the footwork was for men, and I had to retrain because those realities were living inside of me. And as she continues in the chapter, she says she starts to explore the challenges with that for her own body. And there's a section called "Creating Beauty Dressed as a Girl." And she has a quote in there. She says, "You can call me he, you can call me she, you can call me Regis and Kathy Lee, just so long as you call me." And that's RuPaul's song, Letting It All Hang Out in 1995. And then she says, she offers the definition from the Real Academia Española dictionary in Spanish. This has been translated, and it says transvestite, a person who, because of natural inclination or as part of a performance, dresses in clothes primarily associated with the opposite sex. And she says, Manuel Liñal, who is a flamenco dancer, is reluctant to use the terms transvestite or drag or even cross-dressing in relation to his production Viva. He wants to avoid the comic connotations of companies such as Le Ballets Trocaderos, and perhaps he wishes to dignify his men bailaoras, but this choice misses an invaluable opportunity to critique his medium, flamenco, from the inside. And she goes on. So what she's doing with the chapters, again, really challenging and asking and a call to arms in a way for those artists that have been pushing those boundaries, but are perhaps maybe a little bit reluctant to step into that activism in very specific ways. And she then goes on to highlight others who have been stepping into that and using different terminology. So again, it's a really beautiful critical look at flamenco and a queer flamenco. And so I encourage everyone to continue to explore the book, but especially that chapter. And I realize we're running out of time. I do want to allow space for question and answers for those of you that are in this space, to ask any questions or to reflect on anything that is coming up for you. I don't know, Jose Antonio, if you wanted to maybe use this opportunity to ask your question or to think aloud, or anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rosa. It's impressive, and congrats for this gift that is this book. Well, I'm very profane of all this. I'm not an expert at all, but I'm a professional in the museum arena, and I'm fascinated by the capacity of flamenco to build community. That is a big deal today for museums, how to build community, and especially how to create trust relationships. So for me it's a kind of master or kind of model, and I'm curious about what do you think, Russell, you, Rosa, or other people in the room, about this capacity of flamenco to create building, to build community and to build relationships and to build trust relationships. This is one side of my reflection. And also because museums are like a kind of vision spaces, not body spaces, I find incredibly inspiring all this culture of body to try to not only to vindicate museums as a places to perform and to explore your own body and to find your own identity using your body in this context. Also, how this can be used to improve your self-esteem, to improve your autonomy, to improve your identity, to reinforce. You mentioned this incredible chapter of exploration of identities that this choreographer writes. So I think it's very powerful as a tool to explore your identity, to explore your, even to know yourself. So I'm mentioning hot topics in the museums today, in the museums arena today, but inevitably I'm connecting with this session that is so inspiring, and I'm so grateful for all your contributions, Russell, all the authors, your contribution, Rosa. But I think trying to building these bridges and connections is so powerful. All the frames that flamenco provide in terms of museum identity, because it's reshaping the museum identity. And I think flamenco can be a very powerful way to create community, to create a new sense of presence in museums. Museums are sadly sometimes so as mausoleum, very serious places to stop and to be quiet, to be silent. And I think it's very powerful, your approach. That's my feedback.
Thank you. Russell, do you want to reply?
Yeah, thank you, Jose Antonio. I love museums. I've always loved going to museums. I think from the kind of that curatorial standpoint, curation is something we talk about a lot in performance, and also the language of encounter. So I have used that in my dance research, and it's really helped quite a bit, because what happened for me on Christopher Street Pier, you know, approaching as a Roma artist, as someone who does Irish step dance, working with Black, Latinx, queer dancers, queer trans dancers, it became about the site and the objects there, and the site came to life, and not just came to life, it was always alive, right? It's just kind of who sees that or who has access. So on one sense, I feel like within museum spaces, one of the nice things it does with the right curation, I think, is that without having people there, the people going there can see themselves in it. But also at the same time, keeping objects in the hands of people who have understood them is very powerful. There was a scholar in the conference I was just at who she was Algonquin, and she restored a birch canoe that was in a museum, and she brought this museum object back to life. And so it was incredibly powerful in the knowledge and the reunification that happened. So I think that's really important to see how dance, I think particularly among Roma Sinti people, how we have approached and understood these technologies that have been around us, and how dance responds to that, I think is really interesting. Like, I'm very interested in the Bada Shoe Museum, for example. What happens if dancers were invited into that space and started working with these shoes and this knowledge? I think so much is possible. And so I celebrate your work.
Thank you. Yes, and you know, I think just two very quick points. On Wednesday, when I talk about my own work, I'll bring that up a bit deeper. But you know, you're right. Flamenco offers a framework for agency for an individual to come through, which is in many ways something, when we get lost in kind of the debates or about kind of being right about one thing or fighting for one position, you lose sight of that wholeness and of the nuances that I think are part of flamenco. And listening is a political act, and listening. And so if we can listen to the body, and in your context, bring, you know, the body back into the museum and allow flamenco to be a tool to help us, you know, remember or reconnect the mind, the body, and the soul, which might be the individual. You know, everyone is a superhuman in some way and has a superpower. We've just kind of taught that or kicked that out of some of our people, or not celebrated that. So, you know, if in a museum context, we can not disconnect the body from the objects and find ways to bring that loop and to keep closing that loop, I think it would be, and you know, flamenco is a great tool for that in a number of ways. And there are Roma and non-Roma artists using flamenco to build agency, to celebrate different cultural identities, but also I believe it's a tool for intercultural education. So yes. Any other comments, questions? I'm aware of the time. I want to respect everyone's time. Any final thoughts? Just want to say thank you to everyone who has been part of today, who's helped make today happen. There have been lots of people behind the scenes as well, helping us organize. This actually comes from Russell, who Meira asked me to review the book. And I said, yeah, I could review the book, but what's the point of kind of me offering a review? And in that, Russell and I had been in conversation about other things, about Romani dance and kind of Romani identity and conferences, etc. And he proposed that it would be lovely to celebrate the Roma authors in the book. And so then we kind of just thought about how we could do that. And I said, well, we have, you know, COSER, we have a network, and there are different ways that we can, you know, think about what a day might look like. And November 16th, as you know, is International Flamenco Day. So it just felt like this was a really honest way to respect flamenco's history, but also think about, as Belen Maya is saying, how it's shape-shifting, how it's transforming. So thank you to all of you for being here. And I see that Rachel says, thank you so much, everyone, for this opportunity, for an insight into the flamenco community and identity. I'm excited by the discussion of layers of identity that are changing and developing through movements, or in parentheses migration, and the movement, parentheses dancing. I'm also enjoying the welcoming of imperfection throughout the conversation. I'm thinking a lot about the privileging of settler status over quote unquote movers. Thank you to all. Thank you for that. And José Antonio Dolma, thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Gracias a vosotros. Yeah, and I think that, thank you for saying that, Rachel, around the imperfection, because I think it's in the asking of the clumsiness and being in the process that I think it's not only the outputs, but what questions are we asking ourselves, and how can we ask those questions in a bit more of a compassionate, kind, and loving way, even if they are difficult. And for many of us, they can be traumatizing or re-traumatizing, because this is a lived experience, and it's not just sitting over there, it's with us, and it's been with us and for a number of ways. So it's also, I think we'd like to honor that as well, that it's not just a book, it's also people's lives for many situations. But how do we do that, and how do we model some of that? And there's no answers, but I think that was the goal of today, and we're hoping that the next 3 days can continue to open up that conversation, or continue a conversation that has already been opened up in a number of different spaces, but through this network. So thank you all. As always, we end with music. So Kozer, if you could take us out with our música, please. And see everyone tomorrow, hopefully, same time and place. And yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. May you have a lovely